Greetings, Rink Rats, and welcome to this holiday edition of the Blackhawks Rinkcast. I am your host, John Jaeckel. With me tonight are a stellar crew of Rink staff members, starting with the author of our most recent article, a really nice piece on all the stuff that we're going to talk about tonight. Andy Campbell, our man in Rockford, and other places at parts unknown. Next to him is the writer to be named later, Sean Goldstein Fitzgerald, sporting the new Seattle Kraken hat that he got from Santa Claus. It's got both logos on it, actually, the primary and secondary. Ooh, pretty cool. And excuse me, last but not least is Ray Napientek in his first public appearance as president of the Carl Soderberg fan club.
Absolutely.
And he'll be explaining all the whys and wherefores of that to us tonight as we discuss that, among other things. We're glad you could join us tonight. We nestled snugly in your beds with dreams of Rink signature apparel dancing in your heads, no doubt. You can get that at our official sponsor's website, puckhcky.com. That's puckhockey.com. You can get Rink gear there. You can get lots of other signature hockey apparel, player lines, metal band lines, all that stuff that gets Gate really excited. They're great people. And if you use the THERINK discount code, the Rink, you get 10% off anything. So go check them out. They probably have some post-Christmas deals as well. So anyway, we've got lots to talk about tonight, guys. First of all, probably the biggest news, not aside from Carl Soderberg, we'll get to that in a minute, Ray, is the injury to I'm having a brain.
Kirby Dach.
Kirby Dach, thank you. Kirby Dach at the World Juniors, where he was making a lot of news leading up to in the preseason games or the exhibition games. Really looked like he was going to have a great tournament, was validating all of the Hawks, optimism and sending them there to the tournament. And then, as so often happens for the Hawks these days, he had possibly a season-ending injury. Maybe not. Maybe he'll get some action in toward the end of the season. But all right, I want to know what you guys think, starting with Andy Campbell.
Oh, well, thanks. Happy holidays, everybody, and appreciate it, JJ. I was fuming when it happened, and why did they let him play? And, how could you do that? And, that was a poor business decision. I've taken a step back since then. I mean, that was my initial reaction. And, you got to check yourself and say, because when he did decide to go and play for Team Canada, I had no issues with it. So I guess I can't get that mad if he gets hurt, but, you can't ignore that part of it either. I think that you see some people tweeting or writing, well, if you say, oh, he got hurt, they shouldn't let him play. Well, that's short-sighted. Well, actually, it's the opposite. If you argue the business side of things, saying, well, they just, there's not a whole lot of NHL teams that do let their number 2 center entering a season go off and play, in a World Junior tournament. And I certainly understand playing for Canada. I understand the playing at an international level. I certainly think that the intentions were good ones. But in a results-oriented business, intentions don't really hold up too much. And you see New York and a guy like Lafreniere who wasn't playing. And I'm sure New York is, wiping the sweat off their brow going, oh goodness, glad that he didn't do that. Or, we did not, say that was okay. All that said, it's a shame. It really is. It's a drag, but at the same time, he's the man. I mean, he is going to be the man in Chicago for a while. I mean, the talent is there. And truthfully, it's too bad that he, it seems like that Carl Soderberg signing should not have been a reactionary signing to Kirby Dach getting injured. It should have been a signing regardless when you think about it. I mean, if you went into the season and your top 3 centers were Taves, Dach, and Carl Soderberg, and you forget about Strome, be like, oh, all right, well, maybe they could push it here and find a playoff spot. It's a shame. Just hope that he's okay. Hope that he gets back. That picture, that fracture that's going around all over Twitter looks brutal. And I don't know what, requiring surgery or whatnot, but, I think at this point you just protect him and say, just come back when you need to come back. And if that's next season, that's what happens. I don't, in a shortened season and in a season where they probably were not going to be very competitive anyway, rushing him back doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So that's where I'm at.
What do you think, Goldstein?
Yeah. So I don't think it was a mistake for Dach to go play. I mean, he was named team captain. So obviously they viewed him as a leader, and a lot of other top prospects went and played. Byram, Cousins, why can't I think of his name? He lit it up the other night. I can't think of his name. Cole Caulfield, all those guys went and played. So, and they were all drafted the same year as Dach was. Also, if in a shortened season without a training camp, with limited training camp activities, any ice time for a kid who needs to develop, whether it's playing against his peers or upper level talent, I think is a good thing. So it's just unfortunate that Dach got hurt. The Blackhawks seem to let their picks go play in the World Junior Championships. Henrik Jokiharju, I believe, was let go to play during the season. He was a part of the Blackhawks. And I know he wasn't the second overall pick. And ultimately, I think that was because Jeremy Colleton didn't like him and just wanted to get him out of town. And so they let him go play in the World Junior Championship. But I think it was the right move to let him go play. It's unfortunate he got hurt, and it's unfortunate that he probably will miss this entire season, considering this is going to be more of a developmental year. But one thing that I take from it is, so he was named team captain of the World Team Canada. And like Andy said, he's going to be here theoretically for a number of years, and eventually he's going to have to transition to some sort of leadership role. So any experience in a leadership role wherever it is in his career, I think is beneficial, because whether you believe leaders are made or it's an innate ability, you still have to fulfill a leadership role at some point. So I think it was the right move.
Right.
I think the hardest part, you feel sorry for the kid. That's the worst part of it. Hindsight's always 20/20, but he's already got 64 NHL games. He's got a dozen playoff games. What was that expectation to get him out on the ice and get him more play? He should dominate in the corners. He should dominate in front of the net. Probably could have been on the wall on the power play, but for me, if I'm looking at it and saying, okay, this is a developmental thing, it was college or juniors, you got into the World Junior Classic, and you're thinking to yourself, okay, this is a natural progression. To me, it was almost going backwards, though, where you've got this kid that's already got playoff experience, quote unquote playoff experience, not the atmosphere or anything, but there was some intensity. He's got 64, 65 games under his belt at the NHL level. What was that going to be bringing overall to me? So, I'm not, they decided that's fine. It's unfortunate he got hurt. Again, you'd rather him absolutely dominate and you'd feel better about it, but you're in the winning business, as a general manager, as an organization. So for me, the tough part was what was going to be the benefit that was going to be better than when he left. Like Sean said, or Andy said, hey, the leadership or, stuff along those lines. If he went out and dominated 18, 19-year-olds, does that make him a better NHLer? Stuff along those lines. Because he's already played in the NHL. He already knows he has that taste for it. He's not going to Rockford. He's not coming in as a rookie this year. He's coming in as your second-line center that you were hoping to get a lot of minutes out of this year, that you saw in the playoffs last year against Edmonton and Vegas. So, for me, I like the fact that if I was, an organization, I'd say, hey, listen, if it was just a natural progression, you're always going to be there. I have no issues with it. But if you're going to be on my NHL roster, and I know you're going to be on an NHL roster and be a big part of it, my philosophy would always be, hey, you're sticking with me. We got to win with the big, we got to win here. But it is unfortunate. It looked brutal, like you said, Andy. You hope everything comes back all right for this season. Hey, this is a wash. If he comes back and wants to play 10 games, it's all about being ready in training camp in the fall. It's not about this year for him.
Right.
But
Right.
definitely unfortunate.
Yeah. It's funny that you guys have all made some really good points. And I think, I think you got to look at the step back and look at the arc of the team right now and the player. Kirby, 15 years from now, we're going to look back on this, and this is going to be, I think, a very minor blip. We have a guest. Another guest has arrived. He's leaving just as quickly, though.
Sorry, everybody.
It's all good. But, I think when we look back on Kirby Dach's career 15 years from now, this is going to be a really small blip. And I think, the Blackhawks as a team, I don't think much memorable is going to happen for the Blackhawks this year, to be honest with you. I think this is going to be, this is a team a season on the way to better seasons for them, hopefully. And that's me being really optimistic. The photograph that was going around was just gruesome. It's obviously something that they're going to put pins in. It did say that he was going to have surgery. It's going to be a long process of healing, and then also the rehab that's going to have to go with that, the physical therapy. And a guy who's a skilled player, for one of his wrists, it's going to be a long process. But all that said, there's certain things he can still do in the weight room, and keep working on his strength. Obviously not upper body, but certainly lower body. Missing, like I don't think missing the World Juniors is something that's going to really set up the player. I think, but he's going to miss in the NHL this year, set back a little bit, which is unfortunate. But he did a valuable experience last year, so I don't think it's totally a lost year. Regardless of how much he actually plays, because he will have that further.
We've got a frozen John Jaeckel here. There we go.
But I think what he's trying to say, or at least in terms of being able to work out, like he can still work on his core and still his legs, and he can still skate eventually when his wrist heals and stuff like that. I don't know. Have you guys heard? Maybe I've not heard this right, but wrist injuries take a little bit longer to heal, even when the surgery's complete and everything like that. It takes longer to heal, doesn't it? Like you're still weak in your wrist for a long time.
Yeah, it does take a while. And I mean, I remember, and I think it might have been John that put this in our little chat room. And there was that conversation about Marcus Kruger when he had that wrist injury and he came back, and how difficult it was for him to get in a faceoff dot again. And that whole motion of moving the puck back, and what that did, and how that was difficult to overcome. I mean, it's certainly, it's certainly a sport where you are using your wrists quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And so you do need that to be as strong as possible. And I guess, I think if he takes care of it, I don't, as John, as you mentioned, it will probably be just a blip on the radar. I guess personally, my frustration is there was no player that I was more excited to watch this year in the red and black than Dach, and particularly if he was going to be that 2 center and he possibly would skate with 88, it was that all of a sudden, oh my gosh, we finally have someone, solidified in that spot. Now we finally have a centerman for one of the most dynamic players that has ever played the game. And that was what he was the most exciting young player to show up since the 2 legends, Taves and Kane have been around. So it's just a letdown. Be like, oh, it's just a drag.
Yeah. I mean, he and Boqvist are the 2 guys really who are the future of the franchise right now. Maybe Ian Mitchell enters into that conversation at some point this year or the end of the year, if he has a really, the rookie season that some are projecting for him. He enters into that conversation. But these are the guys who are the future right now, these 2 guys. So one half of that equation is on the shelf this year, and it's unfortunate because, I mean, this is what Hawk fans have to really look forward to the next few years is the development of these guys and whoever else forms the next core, It seems almost disrespectful to say that, Jonathan Taves and Patrick Kane and Duncan Keith are really going to be part of the past at some point, but that's the way it's going. I mean, I personally don't believe the Hawks are going to win another cup while those guys are in uniform for the Hawks. It's just the mathematics aren't there, and where they're at in their careers, and it's a shame. But at the same time, it is what it is. And so these guys are the future. And again, you guys were, I think I got disconnected briefly, but you guys are talking about wrist injuries. Who knows? It could affect his play as a center, especially in the faceoff dot. That was what the wrist injury did to Marcus Kruger. I don't remember which hand it was for Kruger. I know he's a left-handed player. But it did affect him in the faceoff dot pretty significantly. And if it has that effect on Dach, then, he could still be a great wing, but we'll have to see. I mean, it's really too early to say that this is going to necessarily prevent him from playing center, et cetera, but he's going to be a really good player. I mean, fortunately it wasn't a knee, but it's just, again, it's going to be a year without Kirby Dach for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
So anybody else have anything on this one?
Nope. Just tough to swallow that it wasn't in the NHL.
Yeah, agreed. Now we're going to move on to Sean Goldstein's favorite topic, and that is the injury to Alex Nylander. Nylander is a guy that certainly Stan Bowman was hoping it was going to be part of this, conversation of the future of the Blackhawks. I mean, in terms of hockey skill, it could be argued that he could be in that conversation. It's the other intangibles that he doesn't seem to have that have kept him out of that conversation. And now he's had a very serious injury, and he may miss all or most of the season as well. What do you guys think, Ray?
It's tough because you don't see what you want to see on the ice from him, but he's still only 80 some odd games into a career, so I mean, he's still only 21, and you're hoping that, he had some, early games on with Boston and struggled a little bit last year. You didn't see what you wanted to see out of him, as a 20 or 21-year-old. I thought this was going to be a big make or break year for him, to say, hey, this is somebody that maybe you see as a piece, maybe you start to see him scratch the surface a little bit, so to speak. But again, he just doesn't get a ton of ice time as well, so, when you're talking about a rebuild, like we joke around in the chat that, if it's going to be a rebuild, maybe he is somebody that was getting 16, 17 minutes a night instead of a dozen. Maybe you're trying to see what you can get out of him. But then if you can't trust him to win a hockey game, he's not getting 17, 18 minutes a night. So that's a tough injury, I think, for him, because he's kind of at that crossroad of, where Dach, you feel like he's going to be good. It's unfortunate. This was, hey, what do we have here after 84 games, 85 games at the NHL level to say, yeah, this is somebody that I could re-sign, or this is somebody that I need to move on from, or if he caught fire and somebody wanted him, I could trade him at the deadline if I didn't, if I felt like I'd get some assets for him. So that's a tough one, because I think he definitely had a lot to prove this year to show, hey, I deserve to be in the National Hockey League.
Sean.
I didn't realize that Nylander was that young. I thought he was older. And yeah, Ray, you're right. He's 21, 22 years old. And this year, it's another blow to the Blackhawks, because this year they're not going to be any good. So it's all about development for the future. And like Ray said, if you're going to find out what you have in the guy, you need to play him as much as possible. And with the burden of trying to win games off the table, like they're not trying to win games this year, regardless of what they say with their advertising or anything. They're not trying to win games, not as many games as possible. They're trying to be bad to get in the lottery and hopefully get lucky and get another top 3 pick. You got to find out what you have in your young players. And Nylander was one of those guys. We hoped Kirby Dach would take another step. So Nylander and Dach not being there is huge blows. It's just, it hurts this quote unquote rebuilds development. You've got to, if you're going to rebuild, you got to figure out what you have before you move down the road. So I think it's horrible that what happened to him.
AC, what do you think?
Well, I think it's a shame for Nylander. It couldn't happen at a worse time in his young career, particularly. I mean, he had a really tough go last year. I mean, he was not great. And I think that there were some definite flaws in his game. The hockey fans that were watching him, I think for the most part found him to be underwhelming and disappointing. That doesn't mean he's like a bad person or anything. I just think that with a team that struggles defensively, he's just not a great fit. When someone's in zone habits are the way that his were last year, it was really painful to watch him. And so he had a long way to go. And so for him particularly to be in a contract year coming up this year, being a restricted free agent to be, where you don't hold any of the cards with your next contract, it is kind of a put up or shut up year for him. And so for him to have an injury that's going to have him miss the rest of the year is really throws a wrench in his career for that matter. And so that's very hard for him. Now, yeah. I mean, now the cynic in me, and no one, wants to hear this, but Stan Bowman could be viewing this right now as his get out of jail free card. I mean, he can walk away from Alex Nylander right now and say, well, he got hurt. So, that's the way that it goes. I don't know what, no one knows what the shape of the team will be in financially. No one knows what the shape of the NHL is going to be in financially when all of a sudden, contract season comes about again, and where and how Alex Nylander will sign anywhere. I mean, there's a possibility Alex Nylander could be signing a 2-way deal somewhere or a PTO for that matter. We just don't know the economics of what the NHL is going to be dealing with. And he certainly at this stage of the game, I don't think that the Hawks will be in a hurry to make him part of their plan. I don't think that Stan Bowman will feel that kind of pressure to say, well, I traded away Jokiharju for this guy. People were mad at me about it. Now I really need to bring him back and prove that this was worth it when he does now have, a little bit more, leverage behind an injury to not have to feel that the burden of that. So I think this really stinks for Nylander. It's really a shame. It's really a shame. And I'm sure he went into, this summer and he probably knew about this injury for a long time and knew that it needed to be fixed. But I did not have high expectations for him as a hockey player this year personally. And that's, again, I hate to be so cynical about someone, but I'm sure he had a lot of high hopes for himself going into a contract year and saying, hey, this year I got to go in and prove that I'm a player in this league. So it's a real drag for him. Injuries are always hard. And particularly with his situation, this could be pretty detrimental to his career because he hasn't quite proven it. Yes, he's still a prospect technically.
Yeah.
But there were some real flaws in his hockey game last year.
Yeah.
At this level. And so, I mean, just an inability to protect the puck very well. Lots of rink turns, not great in his defensive zone. And so, you don't want to see injury, but, you also, I hoping for the best for him, for his future.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, Andy, you make a really good point. I think that, how he comes back from this injury and, how the Hawks bring him back, if they bring him back eventually, I think it's all up in the air now. And it is a shame. I mean, because, when I watched him last year, you'd see him out of the corner of your eye and go, wow, that kid's got some skill. But then you'd see those just selfish bonehead plays. A lot of them without the puck and just being a complete non-factor at times. And just, that typical skating up and down his wing and not really making a difference. It's just a shame with that kind of talent. And, so you had that mental issue that was there that impeded him physically. Well, now you've got a pretty serious physical issue that he's going to have to come back from. How hard is he going to work in his rehab? If he works as hard in his rehab as he does on the ice, it's just not good. So, we're going to have to see what happens with him. I also don't think that the Hawks were really counting on him because of the fact that he kind of played his way out of Buffalo and he, really didn't knock people out last year with his effort and his preparation and his focus. So I don't think they were really counting on him. It's not like Dach where it was like, wow, this is going to be a big step up year for him and one more year in his development. So, it is unfortunate for him too. And that's a really good point because he's probably not a bad kid. He comes from a good family. His brother's a really good hockey player. His dad was a really good hockey player. So, Maybe it'll work out for him, and maybe it won't be in Chicago, and maybe it will. So, but it's I really have to kick myself because I probably should have brought this up right after Kirby Dach, because I think this is a related topic. The Dylan Strome negotiations. What I want to get you guys' take on that, and I'm one who has felt that Dylan Strome may not be quite the hockey player that I think some of the fans believe he is. I don't think he's a bad hockey player. I just think he's limited, and I question whether he really is an important piece in a rebuild, or if he's a guy that can sort of, he could, for example, he could center the second line with Dach being out, I guess. Although center may not be his best position. His skating deficiencies may slow that line down a little bit. But then again, Brad Richards wasn't a great skater either, and he was maybe the best center Patrick Kane has had in the last 5-6 years. So, but what do you guys think about the deal with Strome? Number one, and number two, how does the Dach injury impact the Hawks' bargaining power? And is this perhaps what pushed Stan to go out and sign Carl Soderberg? Ray.
I think Soderberg might have had a little bit to do with that. Obviously, there were some talks before. That doesn't just happen that quickly. But, when that injury happens, you got to get somebody out there who can play in all positions, somebody that can play at the NHL level, somebody you can trust. And I know he's a little bit older, but, he brings what you look for in a third line center, in a perfect world. For me, I'm glad it wasn't Strome. I was nervous that when I saw the Hawks tweet, hey, we signed Strome to this deal, that would have been, I think, the knee-jerk reaction that would have, given me a grabber. His skating, a lot of flybys, doesn't do a lot of the dirty work that you like to see out of a center. For me, okay on draws. He doesn't use his size, I think, to his advantage. He's not a small human being, so, it's something that I think if you could get some draft picks for him, I'd have no problem shipping him out, when it comes to that. But, for me, I'm looking for a second line center. If Soderberg could come up there and play now, fine. That's not going to bother me. I threw a tweet out there that, before the, Carl signing, Hawks projected to 50 points, still 50 points. That doesn't change anything. I think Strome doesn't change anything if he's not around, stuff along those lines. He just doesn't have what I'm looking for, up and down the middle for that center position. So, and then, like you said, you talk about skating deficiencies. For me, a lot of flybys, not tough in the corners, not tough in front of the net. What's he doing out there? He could get some good plays with Kane. You could put a lot of players out there and they're going to get some nice action from Kaner. So, for me, I think Soderberg was fine overall. If you could flip him, if you're going to flip Strome, hopefully you could do it now. I think it does hurt a little bit knowing that, Dach's not going to be around, maybe some trade value that maybe somebody might squeeze you. But, when you look at, Derek Stepan getting a second round pick, what can I get for Strome? He would definitely be on the trading block right now. And especially since a team can get him really cheap if they feel like he can be a difference maker up and down that lineup for him.
Sean, what do you think?
Yeah, I think like Ray said, Strome doesn't really affect you either way. I think he's like a luxury this team can't afford right now. If you're really intent on rebuilding, Dylan Strome is not a part of that plan. You have to move him for assets for the future, because Dylan Strome, even when they're ready to win in a few years, or when the money comes off the books that are holding them back, he's not going to be here. So why invest money in a player that's not going to be in your long-term future is my thing. I suggested Dylan Strome, if he can get you a third and a fifth, I'd make the move. That was before the Stefan trade, obviously, but still, I think you move on from him. He's an offensive luxury. He's an offensive player, and in a team that doesn't play any defense as it is, with the goalies they have this year, he's not going to make that big of a difference. I think if you really want to commit to this rebuild, you move all the assets you can. Strome is an asset you can move, and you can get something in return for him. And I don't know about you guys, but trading for a player and negotiating the contract yourselves gives me more value in my mind, because I'm not taking on somebody's $3 million or $5 million player when maybe I think I can get him for $2 million or something like that. He's not a luxury you can have. Soderberg will be a nice piece, and hopefully he plays well enough they can flip him at the deadline and get more assets back. Right now it's all about developing the young players you have and acquiring assets. That's all it is. There's no like we're gonna try to sneak into the A spot anymore. There's none of that anymore. This is what the rebuild is. And if you're going with John's line of thinking of cost cutting, then Strome's gone. Strome's got to go because he costs you too much money.
Andy, what do you think, man?
Well, so I'm with Ray. Like when I originally heard of the Dach injury, my first inkling was, oh man, now this Strome signing is going to be expedited and it's going to come quick, and looks like he's coming back. As a hockey player, I'm not the biggest Dylan Strome supporter. His skating deficiencies, he's not particularly quick. Will he be able to keep up with the pace of the NHL in the latter stages of his career? Like as he nears his 30s, is he even going to be in the league anymore? And so that kind of committing to a rebuild with Dylan Strome as your number 2 center doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I don't have the feeling that he and his camp right now are feeling a whole lot of love from the Blackhawks as they quickly sign Carl Soderberg. I'm sure that, that might've been a signal to him of maybe it's time to move on.
Yeah, this isn't the Marcus Kruger, handshake agreement where we're going to wait the last possible second to move money, sign you, and then we'll pay you on your next contract.
Yeah.
This isn't that.
I'm totally with Sean that see what you can get for him right now at any cost. Now, but here's the other thing. Now, I don't know where Stan Bowman's head is, and none of us do. And we've known that for a long time, but if the idea is that Stan is really trying to convince himself, let's try to make a run at this year, and I need to prove something to the fans, that Soderberg contract signals to Strome that if you want to come back to the Blackhawks, you are probably going to take something in that term and something at that price or less than that if the Hawks can afford it. Do you bring Strome back on a 1-year deal and just say, put him in 2, put Soderberg at 3, and let's actually try to see if we can run with this? Or do you just kind of say, we're going to go into this season without really having a real number 2 center, and it's a shortened season. Let's just see how we do. Let's see what Pius Suter can do. I mean, Pius Suter, he's highly coveted. He's the MVP of that, Swiss A League. The last MVP of that Swiss A League is a guy named Dominik Kubalik, who the Hawks signed, and he comes in and he pumps in 30 goals. Suter can play center and he can play wing. Is he someone that can come in? They go, all right, put him with Patty, put him with 88, and let's see what we can do. And is he your number 2 center for this year? And then maybe he goes to wing ultimately. I mean, a Soderberg is a number 3 center, a 3 or a 4, realistically, on any winning team. It's nice to have him for the depth. I actually think the signing's a good one. You need some seasoned players. You need some good pros, especially with the defensive woes that the Hawks have. You need someone, who's a pivot who can play in their own end of the ice. That's critical. And he's proven that he can do that. He can do that very well. And so I think that it's, you don't want to make sure that you get lit up every single game, and he can certainly, play that role. But then the center depth right now is so confusing. It's just kind of this laundry list of guys that can play center,
Right.
But they're all kind of 3 or 4 centers, 3 at best, and 4 likely centers in the NHL. So you have you've got your 1 in Jonathan Taves, you have your 2 who got injured, and then you've got a 3 who might play 2, but it's like, it's kind of like it's like the Cubs and their leadoff man, how they can never get their leadoff man figured out. It's like the Hawks and their number 2 center. It's like, come on.
Yeah, because then you have your collection of Walmark, Janmark, and Camp.
Right.
All just their guys.
Right. Carpenter, Shaw and Smith, but who knows where their careers are headed at this stage of the game. They can all play a 4th line grinder center role, but you just don't really have that number 2 right now. Now, are they going to give Pius Suter that look?
Might as well.
Maybe, yeah.
Why not?
Year, give anybody and everybody a look.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree.
And I think they have something in Kurashev, but it just might not be this year. He might need another half season in Rockford, depending on when the AHL gets going, but he's also fitting the mold of that 3rd line,
right?
defensive center role that maybe when they walk away from Soderberg, maybe that's their third line center. So I don't know. I think it's a good signing, the Soderberg signing. I'm all for it. I do think it's time to walk away from Dylan Strome. I certainly, Ray and Sean, I agree with both of you that he should not be part of the plan. He just doesn't quite fit. There's something missing from his game that just doesn't, there's no wow factor there.
It's funny about Strome because the guy that I want to compare him to, and it's that missing, hard to nail down missing ingredient. But I want to hope that he'll develop into sort of a Jason Spezza type player. But there's just something out there with him. And, I look at Strome and he's not physically very mature at this point. And so I've wondered, can he, when he grows up a little bit physically, and when I say he's tall already, but he's really skinny and he's not very strong. You can just tell by looking at him. You wonder if he could, because every once in a while he'll push back and he'll show a little bit of what the Canadians call sandpaper. He'll show a little bit of that every once in a while, but he's not going to do much right at this point because he's overmatched physically by a lot of players and a lot of opposing centers. And you wonder if he could mature physically and gain some strength, if that could make him a more effective short area player as a center, even if he's never going to be a great skater. And all that said, I don't know. It just feels like the way this negotiation is going and the Hawks are going to play hardball with him. I don't feel like he's got a lot of leverage with him. And here's the other thing I want to say about Strome, because Strome is sort of a flashpoint. I mean, Strome is a guy that Stan Bowman traded a number one or a first round pick for, Nick Schmaltz. And when he came in, people thought, "Oh, Stan won this trade." And but a lot of the bloom has come off the Strome's rose, so to speak. And I want to see if Bowman is willing to play hardball and do like Sean is saying and recognize that Strome is really not the kind of asset you want for this rebuild. He's maybe more of a short-term solution to some problems. So it's going to be interesting to see how Bowman deals with him. And does he trade him now while somebody might give you a second and third round pick for him? Because you got to remember, it wasn't too long ago. He was a third overall selection in the draft.
2015.
Yeah. And so it is possible that you could get some decent futures for him right now. If he goes to another team or he spends another year with the Hawks and they move him out to wing and it becomes a poor man's Artem Anisimov, you're probably only going to get like a third round pick for him. So, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how Bowman handles this, or, if they try to plug him in at 2C because Dach's going to be gone, which to me is very much it's a Band-Aid solution. It has nothing, it doesn't make any sense really for the team, for the development of the team, but we'll see what Bowman does. This could be a little bit of a flashpoint for it was. My first reaction was, why are they?
Oh.
His reaction was clearly shocking.
Well, right. But the more I thought about it, thought they could flip him at the deadline. And he is the kind of player pick up at the deadline. And for $1 million prorated left on his deal, that's a brand get something for him. So it kind of makes.
Well, and John, especially if you're a rebuilding team, like you want to do that. You want to get cheap assets that you can flip for future assets at deadlines. Like you want to get like Carl Soderberg or I don't think the Rangers, I don't think did this when they rebuilt, but I guess I'll go to a different sport. Like what the Cubs did when they rebuilt, they signed guys to deals that going into the deal, they knew if they performed at their career level or above, they were going to flip them for something else. Like that was just the point of signing that player.
Yeah, right.
Because ultimately the money wasn't the important thing. It was the future asset that they were getting. And maybe, maybe they do with Strome, they do a sign and trade where they sign him to a deal that they can afford. They keep some of that cap space on their books and they get a better prospect or a better pick in return. They can do that too. I mean, the Blackhawks finally have a little bit of salary cap space. Maybe leverage that as a weapon. in a deal with somebody.
Well, it would be nice to see Bowman start to do some things that say, yes, you are rebuilding, because so far he's talked about it, but he hasn't really done anything other than getting a couple of ECHL guys in those deals over the summer. Like anything you could look at and go, wow, yeah, that's a really great, that says that they're focusing on the future. There's nobody who wants to see Stan Bowman succeed more than I do. Honestly, I really do. I'm really down on him and have been for the last year or two, especially since the Robin Leonard situation last year. But it would be great because it would be great for the team. And it would be great for the fans if we really could have, a real rebuild and a real future for this team, built around Dach and Boquist and whoever else. But I just want to see those moves that are really rebuilding moves. So far, it's like hard to discern. That's why I say I think the Strome thing and how he handles it, it's going to be interesting. If he moves Strome for picks, then I think you're like, yes, he's really starting to do some rebuilding moves. What do you guys think?
The hardest part about that is the only move that rebuilding moves that I think what you would go, whoa, holy cow, we're really rebuilding, would be having a tough conversation with John Davis, Patrick Kane, and Duncan Keith saying, what do you, give me 10 teams. Are you willing to do this? Keith, you want to make a run at it? You could maybe win 2 more. Kane, I could get a king's ransom for you. Are you open to it? Stuff along those lines. That's kind of where they're stuck. I mean, Seabrook, that's,
That's never going to happen.
It's never gonna happen. So you look at those 3 guys and you go, hey, what can I get back in return for those 3 guys that would say, hey, we're rebuilding. And that way you could see, Pius, I think he's going to get some time with Kane to see if he could play. I don't think he's going to come in and shoot 19% like Kubalik did. I don't think Kubalik's going to finish his career as a 19% shooter. The Brinket's going to be better than 8% next year, than he was last year. So these guys are going to, the averages and stuff along those lines. Right. So you get a guy like a Pius that can play, and but what other pieces can they ship out to say, hey, we're rebuilding besides those 3 guys, and that's a tough conversation to have. And whether that comes from, we're just going to ride this out and see where it goes and start all over and pretend like we're rebuilding. But the only 3 guys that I think you could say, wow, look, we're ready to make this a rebuild is those 3 guys and try and get some return for them. Because, you get picks for Strome, you get picks for Soderberg, hopefully you get picks for, whoever you can flip. But are those going to be difference maker picks, when you're talking about 2nd or 3rd rounds, as opposed to maybe I can get myself some 1st round picks.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, in terms of the big building blocks you need for a rebuild, you're not going to get them unless there's some bigger conversations about guys waiving no movement clauses, et cetera. And, we've gone around and around on that on this show, and I wouldn't rule that out as if one or more of those players goes to management and says, I really would like a shot at another cup somewhere, and I don't think I'm going to get it here. Those people, I think a lot of Hawk fans don't think that happens or can happen. It does happen, and it could happen. Especially when you got a Patrick Kane, who's the youngest of those 3 players and probably the most remaining ability, really is in his prime. And they're all very competitive guys. Every one of those 3 guys, super competitive guys. And I think it's so, but you're right. I mean, but I mean, just in terms of, like, for example, the Sod trade, and not to relitigate that, but I mean, there were a lot of people, myself included, but especially our friend Jeff Osborne, gatekeeper, who was really disappointed that they didn't get more futures for Sod, but we don't have to go into that again. And I guess I'm talking more about that. I mean, even like getting a 3rd for Soderberg, or, getting, a couple of picks for Strome. I mean, and again, as opposed to holding on to Strome and giving him some kind of a bridge deal and plug him in when he's limited, he may not be on that team or in any kind of a meaningful role when you get to win a cup again, if you get to win a cup again. Why would you hold on to him? Or will you flip him and get some assets? I guess that's what I'm talking about. They're not huge moves, but they do signal that you really are focused on the future instead of the same old BS and, talking about rebuilding.
Ray said, if you're going to rebuild, commit to it. Commit to it.
Right.
And why not this year? The seats are probably going to be empty during the season, more than likely anyways. So you're not losing it. You're already going to lose that revenue on ticket sales anyways. Why not? If you're going to rebuild this year or last year are the years. Like, if you're going to fully commit to it, like Ray said, like have those conversations. This is the time, because you're not going to lose ticket sales, because nobody's good. The majority of people aren't going to be able to go.
Yeah, I think those conversations, I mean, if we're referring to those conversations and inviting players like Kane and Taves and Keith to come in and say, look, we have a feeling you might not be able to win here again. If you'd like to go, we can work on this for you. I think that they're more than likely going to be able to have that conversation with a player like Duncan Keith, where with Kane and Taves, their contracts are so heavy during difficult financial times, where I don't know if those conversations can happen with those two until maybe another couple years. I think their contracts are up in the summer of 2023.
Right, but the contracts were front loaded. Like they made like all their money, like the cap hit is big, but I'm pretty sure their money, I'm trying to look it up right now, their money was paid out in the beginning of it. Like I think it was structured similar to what Marian Hossa's deal was. Like Marian Hossa made all his money up front, and then at the end of his contract, even though the cap hit was $10.5 million, the actual dollar amount that he was getting paid was way less than.
Right, but I'm referring to the actual cap hit itself still being a problem for someone else who would have to take on. I mean, a $10.5 million cap hit for 3 years of Jonathan Taves is a lot.
Yeah, no, it is. It is. And the Hawks would probably have to take some money back.
Right, exactly.
Or they would have to retain. But
where Keith at 5.5 might be a little bit more plausible.
Right. So. There's a lot of ways to skin a cat, though. And they're they can retain money now. They can they can take an expiring deal back, or they can take a few million back on a player they want to keep. You never know. I mean, I guess it depends. Like, for example, I think the one guy that if you threw his name out there, it'd be interesting to see what kind of offers people would put together. That would be Patrick Kane, and you might have to take a contract back, but somebody could really sweeten it with a lot of great futures, knowing you want them. If it's a team that's really close and that high scoring dynamic winger could be the thing, super competitive, 3 cups to his credit. He's 32 years old. Again, it's all what ifs. But stranger things have happened in the world of pro sports trades, and I don't think the Hawks are going to be actively shopping those guys, but I think it's probably not a secret to any of the 30 NHL GMs that if you called Stan Bowman, he would at least listen. So you never know, it'll be interesting to see, especially if they're out of the playoffs by the trade deadline, or clearly we're looking at another 2 to 3 years.
They're out of the playoffs now, John. No, they're out of the playoffs now.
I understand. No, I understand that, and that's what I'm saying. I mean, it's going to really, because these guys are going to look at it. They're going to go, "Wow, I may never get another shot at a cup."
Right.
What does that mean, and how do I feel about that? And when the building, and again, I realize that we're dealing with COVID and the building's empty now. However, I didn't realize that last week, but when they start to see what it's like to play for an also-ran team, a middle of the pack or worse team, without all the things that go with being the Chicago Blackhawks of the last 15 years, it's going to be interesting to see, whether those guys want to stick around. And I know we end up talking about this every show, but it is like the big 800-pound gorilla in the room of the Blackhawks, I think, every year, especially going forward, it's going to be. What do you think, Ray?
It's going to be the same thing as we've been talking about. I mean, I feel like we've been having this conversation for a long time. I think 2 years ago, I did a podcast with you guys, and I said it's all about 2023, and it's not 2023 yet.
Yeah.
Here we are. We're still kind of talking about the same stuff over and over. I know you want to win. I know you want to compete at the highest levels and stuff along those lines. But this is, I've said this before. This is 2 years too late. This is something that, you always talk about good general managers, like, oh wow, he got rid of him at the right time, or wow, he made that move at the perfect time. Now you're kind of stuck.
Right.
In neutral and probably you're in neutral downhill as well, going the wrong way. So for me, I think, they say rebuild, they say that they're doing all the right things. You're stuck, with a lot of older guys that want cups with you. And that's just kind of where we're at. We're talking about this 2 years ago, before they picked Kirby Dach, that it should have been, hey, let's take a run at 2023 and now you look at it and go, hey, you're throwing a pandemic and I'm not getting beer sales and I'm not getting jersey sales and I'm not doing this and I'm not doing that. Hey, you might have been at the bottom, taking on payment. Yeah, give me a first rounder. I'll take that $6.5 million. I got to get to the bottom, or hey, something along those lines. I'll take on another guy, but it's 2 years too late now. So
yeah,
just stuck in neutral, going uphill.
I agree. I mean, it's a shame because, a couple of years from now, we could be talking about, several Kirby Dachs in Adam Boqvist, but it's going to be a slow process. And it's going to, when one of these guys gets hurt, like happened this year, it throws a damper on the whole thing. Because I agree with you. I think the Hawks have prepared themselves for coasting into 2023. I don't think there's any doubt about that. The organization is on coast. They're talking about rebuilding, but they know as well as anybody, the way they're doing it, it's going to be a very slow process because they're not making huge fundamental moves in terms of the roster and the pipeline. And anybody who buys that doesn't know what a rebuild really is. And we've all said that, but that's what they're prepared for, certainly. And I wonder if they're in a stance of, well, if somebody comes at us and makes us an offer that makes sense for us financially, and it gives us a ton of futures, if they would do it. I think they would. It depends on what the offer is, though. As always, I mean, it's always about the market, So
we could trade for Sod and lose a Sod trade for the fourth time. That'd be
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
a lot of people say that. No, yeah, and that's the toughest part. Is really it's got to have some tough conversations with guys that are going to be in the rafters, guys that are always going to be coming back. For the rest of their lives, are always going to be Blackhawks. Like you said, until then, you're kind of stuck in neutral.
Yeah.
Nobody wanted to see Mike Modano go play for the Red Wings. Nobody wanted to go see guys who like wore your team sweater go play for somebody else. But in the more defined salary cap era, that's usually an eventuality. Most guys don't retire with one team.
Right.
And looking it up, Kane is due $7 million this coming season in actual salary. It's 10.5 cap head, and then it goes down to 6.9 for the next 2 seasons in actual money paid out. So maybe the Hawks if creativity can play in the deal. I'm just saying that, like, I didn't mean to kind of crap all over what Andy said earlier, just that the 10.5, they're not actually getting paid that. So if a team is willing to if they have the room for that cap space, knowing that they're not going to pay that might be a more attractive. Or maybe they wait until 2 years of Kane at 10.5 might be more feasible for a team next year after this shortened season when people start getting back in the stands.
Yeah, if they're not good in the fall of 2022, then the conversations we're going to be having about Kane and Taves at the trade deadline are going to be really fun. But Ray, I agree with you. I mean, they can't rebuild. They really can't. They're stuck. They've got immovable assets. I mean, Corey Crawford, I guess that's somewhat of a step, letting him walk. But that was the only available move to make out of one of the quote unquote core guys, because the other 4, you can't move them unless they want to be moved. And that's it. So,
right. Yeah.
If you're going to be going with Delia and Subban and, everybody else, might as well have seen if Corey was interested at last year's trade deadline. Why not get rid of Leonard and Corey?
That's what I said.
There's no excuse for that.
That's what I said. I said they should have traded both.
Yeah.
If they were going to rebuild, they should have just traded them both.
You got these 2 hot ticket goalies, and we could go on and on, but
they are the first and probably last 24 seed to ever win a playoff round. So you can always hang on to that.
Yeah, they got my money to go watch in a parking lot at Boomer Stadium. They were in the playoffs during a pandemic. So, that's what it was. That's why they kept Corey to get my money and get other people's money. And that's why they kept Corey.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I also wonder how much John McDonough had to do with that decision to keep Crawford, to trade Leonard. It's also interesting that they actually even had mentioned the word rebuild. They didn't start talking about that until McDonough was gone. And maybe someday some of that backstory will leak out. Maybe not. We'll see. But
Jay Zawaski will write that book.
And I won't read it. No, nothing personal, Jay. But I don't read anything.
I probably will. I probably will read it eventually.
It's like The Athletic. I don't subscribe to The Athletic. I get other people to tell me what was in the stories.
I'm a big library guy. That's how I read. So
I'm curious on Colleton, and how much longer does he have? Is he going to be around after this year? Is he going to be a big part of this rebuild? And I think one of the things that I really don't want to see is in a shortened season is that this constant, and unfortunately, I think it's going to happen, this constant shuffling of the deck and these new line mates every single night, and nothing seems to stick. And are you going to let these guys play and figure it out? Or is it going to be this constant, I need to change things systematically, and this guy needs to sit for a game? And, I don't know, that might be something that could wear on the players a lot too, when they finally do go to management and say, get me out of here. But, I wonder, I don't know if he's the right guy. I don't think so. But
well, it's interesting you say that. And that's another, as we talk about the possibility of one or more of these guys going into management saying, look, I want to change. I mean, there has been scuttlebutt. And I've never had it independently verified by anybody, but there has been scuttlebutt, and it's not hard to some of the body language sometimes, especially with guys like Taves, that some of the vets were having a little bit of an issue with Colton. And again, I mean, the question was asked by a lot of people when this promotion of Bowman was announced. Why are they keeping Bowman? And then the people were also asking, why are they keeping Colton? And I guess what it comes down to is if you're not really trying to rebuild, and if you're not really going to compete, it may not really matter that much. And the team can't afford to be firing guys, so they're dead salaries that they're paying. So maybe that's why they're still around, and maybe that's why Bowman was promoted. I don't know, but I mean, I gotta wonder too, though, especially because you're right. I mean, Colleton is going to be talking the talk, and he's going to be playing it tough and talking about effort every night and playing for 60 minutes, et cetera, et cetera. And I think some of these veteran guys are going to go, shut the F up. I question, Duncan Keith. How much is Duncan Keith going to listen to a guy who's younger than he is, who's never won anything like he has, et cetera? I mean, I just wonder how long these guys are going to put up with this and how long they're going to remain committed to this. I wouldn't blame them. Because these are guys who could go elsewhere and compete for cups still. Mm-hmm. I don't know, but maybe I'm being overly optimistic about the potential trade market for them. I don't know.
Well, and piggybacking off what John and Andy said, like the line shuffling, especially when Andy said the line shuffling every year, are we going to scrap Colleton's system after 10 games, like years past? Because remember, he wanted to play a more defensive system, and then they don't score. They look really bad, and then we go to run and gun again. It's just wheeling and dealing. At some point, if you're really committed to a rebuild, then Jeremy Colleton is your guy, and the veteran guys should be gone. But if you're in between, Jeremy Colleton is not that guy because he can't placate the veterans.
Yeah, that falls on Stan too. I mean, when you're following up Coach Quinville, who just finished, the best run in the history of the organization. One of the winningest coach, what's he, number 2 in the league?
Yep.
Bring in a guy that's got some chops, that's coached in the league, who can get you through a year and a half. His dad had to know somebody that could step in there and say, listen, this is what we're going to do. I've won a Stanley Cup as an assistant coach. I've got 200 games under my belt as an NHL, bench boss. Colleton was putting in, it might as well have been me back there, to say, hey, Johnny, this is what we're going to do. Dunks, this is what we're going to do. Looking back at me going, what? No, who is this guy? So, I mean, he was put in a really tough spot.
Yeah, he was.
And that's on the general manager. He put him in there's been a lot of times that, John, I think you mentioned it, where you see the bench, you see the reaction and stuff like that. There's more cameras than they do with now in rinks. So, but that's on Stan again for me. Did you really think Jeremy Colleton was going to walk in and he was going to demand the respect from these guys and take you to the promised land again? versus you could have brought in, and I don't know the names, you'd have to go back and say, hey, he's got a little bit of chops behind the bench. He knows what he's doing back here. You're going to respect him. Again, he's not 3 years younger than Duncan Keith. You've been better off just making Jonathan Toews a player coach. So, but
one of
that's
the things,
manager.
one of the things I heard back then was that the veterans, the Stanley Cup veterans, the core guys, the guys we've been talking about really, and Brent Seabrook were very disappointed when Q was let go. Q had a really good relationship with those guys, and that was something I heard at that time. And I think my strong suspicion is that they made the move and brought in Colleton because they were disappointed that Q was not, in their minds, developing the young players the way they wanted them developed. Now, you can look back on that and go, well, maybe that wasn't Q, and maybe that was just those young players, because with the exception of Tirabasi, who's gone elsewhere and developed, a lot of those guys have gone elsewhere and not developed. Ryan Hartman, Nick Schmaltz has not exactly set the world on fire, and I think that
Forsling, Brandon Peary,
right.
The list goes on and on.
Right. And so I think that was what caused it. I also have to wonder again, and again, I'm not making excuses for Stan Bowman. I'm the last person who's going to do that. However, I would love to be right in suggesting that maybe John McDonough had something to do with that as well.
Yeah.
It just seems like when he left, some things did change in terms of how the team was addressing some things, like at least talking about a rebuild, if not doing one. Bowman didn't write all those contracts with no movement clauses without McDonough's imprimatur on them. And frankly, McDonough may have had a lot to do with those contracts. Because nothing in that front office happened in a vacuum, or Stan Bowman going off and being a cowboy. Didn't happen that way. It's not how it worked.
It's the John McDonough plan. When he took over the Cubs, John McDonough, first thing he did, spent a ton of money, overpaid guys.
Right.
Well,
that's what they did.
Yeah.
Alfonso Soriano got that huge deal. Marian Hossa gets a huge deal. You can draw the parallels to it.
I'm with you though, Ray. I mean, Colleton came into a lose situation.
Yeah.
There was nothing good that was going to come of that. I mean, when you think about the core guys, when Joe Quenneville showed up, they were kids.
Right.
I mean, they were absolute kids. And he just said, I'll teach you about the NHL and we'll go win championships together. When that guy is missing from your life, just like that, has a huge impact. And the next guy who comes in, no chance.
Yeah. And the next guy is younger.
Yeah.
Than two or three. I think was younger than Crawford, Seabrook, and Keith.
Yeah, and it's Seabrook's World Junior teammate, and Seabrook looks at him and goes, "This guy was terrible. What are we doing?"
I know Jeff Glass was better than this guy.
Oh.
And then he puts him in the stands. Yeah. Whoops.
Yeah. It's interesting to see how this plays out. I think I agree with you guys. If you look at it on paper, they're stuck. There's nothing they can do. But it'll be interesting to see again how this thing plays out over the next couple of years. It may just be we're having the same conversation until 2023. Everybody just buckle in, because this is going to be it. No, I'm kidding. We'll have Sean talking about the Cubs every podcast from now on.
Well,
but it's good.
We'll have Andy talking about the prospects he sees at the AHL level, because that's going to give us some measure of hope.
Yeah,
because
hopefully,
hopefully they get going this year. Might not
all
be
the guys at the ECHL level are all former AHL guys who want to play hockey currently.
So Andy, who at the AHL are you excited about this year, and why?
I know I've said this before, and I obviously need to be careful. I play my favorites, but Evan Barrett is a really intriguing prospect, and I really, a lot of people are saying, well, Nylander has gone down now, and so maybe that's someone who, could all of a sudden step into a role. I just really hope the Hawks are really careful with this kid. I don't know if he forecasts this caliber of player, but if you look at a guy like Mike Camilleri, who came out of the NCAA ranks, who just kept getting better and better and better, and spent a full year and a half in the AHL before he came up to develop his scoring touch and learn how to be a professional and to play at a faster pace. That's the kind of player Evan Barrett has been since his freshman year at Penn State, just better every year, heavily relied on. every single special team situation, put in those positions. I really think that he's a guy that if he's in Rockford for some period of time, he's ultimately going to be helpful. And it might be at a time when the Hawks are saying, well, actually now we're starting to get going here. And he might be able to be in that fold. Now, I mean, will the AHL get going on February 5th? I don't know. Who knows where this whole thing is going. But what I really don't want to see is him just all of a sudden be penciled into some fourth line role in Chicago and be lost out there. And, and everyone's going, what's he doing out here? And then the fans turn on some young kid.
Yeah, right.
And so he's a prospect that I really think from a developmental standpoint, the AHL is going to be really good for. He's the one that comes to mind. Everyone is so jazzed, or well, not everyone. Stan is jazzed about Wyatt Kalynuk, but he might need some time down there.
Oh yeah.
In the AHL, probably will.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden I'm blanking on Bodine is someone I don't want the Hawks to mail in on yet either. And the reason being is I live in the Boston area now, and you watch a guy like Matt Grzelcyk. And Bodine is that is his style of play. And Matt Grzelcyk was not a regular in the NHL until he was 24, 25 years old.
Right.
And Bodine is still very, very young. He's not as good as a skater as Grzelcyk is now, obviously. But if he works on that skating, that's a really good role. I mean, you watch Grzelcyk, the way he plays, he's just, I'm going to keep everything in front of me. Right. I'm not going to try to go into the corners and run someone over. I'm just going to contain, kind of like a defensive end. Like don't let him go here.
Right.
And so Bodine, I don't want them to mail in yet. I still think another year in the AHL of Bodine, they could have something. Chris ready to move on. But so I think Barrett and Bodine, I'm so curious about.
What about Regula, the guy who they got for the guy from Detroit?
Yeah,
the OHL kid.
Yeah, and the Perlini trade. I mean, that is a steal. I mean, that kid is going to be a very, very good hockey player.
Good.
Really, really good sized kid. Played his prep hockey at Cranbrook School, before going to London, Ontario, and he was terrific. I mean, anyone who comes from London in the OHL, I think that's if you're going to be playing in the OHL and you're playing in London, you're well coached. You're playing on a winner. Dale Hunter does a great job up there. Really, really big kid, 19, 20 years old, something like that right now, right-handed shot. So I think that he could go and be very, very physical, but thank you for bringing him up, Shawnee, because I'm really high on him. I'm
going to throw out another name I don't think we should sleep on. He's not going to be a guy who's ever going to, come to Chicago and he like get people jumping out of their seats in terms of style of play. But as a defenseman and as a defensive defenseman, I think I'm going to ask you, Andy, to keep an eye this year on Anton Lindholm. I first heard his name. He first got on my radar about 4 years ago, and the Hawks were part of a group of teams that were pursuing the center from Colorado who went to Columbus, Matt Duchene.
Mm-hmm.
And they were putting together a package, and a guy that Bowman was asking about then 4 years ago was Anton Lindholm. And what I was told was the reason was they saw him as sort of a Nicholas Hjalmarsson light type guy, very competitive, really, really good in his own end, smart plays, could carry the puck, was not a guy who was going to put up a lot of points like Hjalmarsson was.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be interested to see because when his name came up in this Colorado trade, I remembered it. It was like out of the blue. And I think I told Gate a couple of years ago that Lindholm was a guy that the Hawks had their eye on.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't mean that Stan Bowman's always right, but it isn't when a team comes back to a guy over and over again. There's usually a reason that they did it, and the scouts have graded him. So I'll be interested to see, how he fits in at Rockford, or if he ends up getting some time as the number 7 guy in Chicago as well, because he played some in the NHL with Colorado too.
Yeah. Well, if he's playing on Colorado's blue line, then I would expect at some point this year, we might see him in Chicago, but yeah, a little bit of an older player, not a huge guy, but
right.
to your point, but still carries that physicality to him. And I mean, and anyone, I know we threw out the term sandpaper earlier. I mean, certainly you need someone in front of your net, who's unafraid to play the body. And I think that's where, the Hawks, and I do worry that some of their prospects are these very smooth skating guys, and we don't have enough, build to them, if you will. But no, he's certainly intriguing. That'll be very interesting to see where he fits in this year.
Yeah, he's sort of like, again, he's been described to me, and I'm not going to claim that. I think I've seen him twice playing for Colorado, but he's been described to me as kind of a smaller, little less rugged version of Nicholas Hjalmarsson. And, if he has that kind of instinct to his game, that could be a nice addition to the Hawks, albeit, as a depth defenseman. Because there is a reason that they kept coming back to him.
Yep.
And maybe that'll be borne out. So we'll see.
And Barrett, I liked him through the USHL development. Caught him last year actually live against Wisconsin. He's kind of the guy that if Soderberg's there and you've got somebody else, like he may be that guy like I was talking about earlier, like don't rush him. If he needs some time, he's a good playmaker. And then he's exactly what Chicago would need in that bottom six, that you played against him at the end of the night. He's not the biggest guy in the world, but at the end of the night, he's been on top of you. You felt his stick. You felt him in the corner. He forechecked. He backchecked. At the end of the game, you played against him. And that's why the Hawks 2 years ago, and even last year, where there were teams that got on the bus that one year and didn't even shower. Hey, that was a good workout. Let's go back to LA, wherever it comes from. So that's where I think Barrett brings a little bit of that, but you don't want to rush a kid like that either, even if he is just playing bottom 6 minutes. Because you could crush a kid doing that.
Yeah. I've heard Dave Boland use as a comparable for him, and that type of player you're talking about, who just is what to play against. Not real big, but just he's just all over you. I'll never forget in 2015 in the Western Conference Finals when Ryan Kessler just lost it on Marcus Kruger, and the reason he did is because Kruger had been up in his shit the whole series. And a lot of people like to put down Kruger, but I'll tell you what, if Barrett could even be that kind of player, that's a valuable NHL player, as a centerman, and somebody who can defend and, make some plays here and there, and, just be a real pain to play against up and down the ice, and does great things without the puck, et cetera. Those are guys that they're going to need. They're going to need the Kirby Dachs and the Adam Boqvist, but they're going to need those kind of guys too, up and down the lineup.
Barrett he can chip in offensively too. I mean, he can shoot.
Good.
It has a really, really good shot. And I don't think he'll be like a 30 goal scorer in the NHL, or it's certainly not right out of the gate. But, if they take care of him, if they develop him, there are third line guys that can get 15, 20 goals a year.
Right.
They're people.
Dave Boland.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, we're coming up on an hour and a half, and I promised the world that we would keep this to an hour. But this has been great conversation. You guys have anything else you want to add on any of these topics, or the Cubs, Sean?
I just compare it because John McDonough ran both teams. That's all it is.
No, it's good, man. It's good. I'm just teasing you. You know that. I kid because I love.
Yeah. Well, you'll be hearing.
Ray, you got anything?
No, not at all. No, definitely good talk with you guys. Excited that hockey's coming up. It's a crazy year. Last year was nuts. Just to be able to turn on and see the Hawks play, it's definitely gonna be a lot of fun.
Tree and a turd is coming. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah, for sure. And just getting back into covering hockey. Like, I'm excited to I like reading Ray's steel pieces, and like whenever I come across a guy who's played with the steel, I make sure to mention it. There's some guys in Indy that play, and I'm excited to see Andy's pieces on the Rockford Ice Hogs, and just like, now that we know kind of where the direction we're going, like, yeah, it'll be cool to watch the Hawks and stuff, but I want to know about the other guys. Like, I want to know about the guys who are going to be there in the future, hopefully. It's kind of an exciting time for that. Like, you almost want to pay attention to more of the minor league side, the minor professional side, than the NHL side, because the NHL side might be painful.
I mean, Andy, you're coming really onto the rink at a really opportune time when a lot of the fan base is going to start paying a lot more attention to Rockford. And this is a good time to add this. And we've had a pandemic this year, and we had a weird NHL playoffs where the Hawks won a play-in and actually played in a playoff series for the first time in 3 or 4 years. And with lots happened. And one of the things is that Andy joined us, and he's, already really made a mark in terms of our readership and the people who view our podcast, and we're really grateful for that. But I also want to add, because we haven't had a chance to say this, at least on the podcast, a fond farewell and good luck to our former colleague and one of the founders, really, of the Rink, Mario Tirabasi, who's joining Bleacher Nation, doing their Blackhawk coverage. Mario had some changes in his life, and it made it necessary for him to kind of break away from us in terms of regular contribution, but he's still very much a part of our community, and he's in our chat. And as we always say, when somebody leaves, if we like them, they'll be Rink Rats forever. We like everybody so far. So, it's times change, but it's Andy brings an element of deep hockey knowledge as a former player. And I don't know if you coach yet, Andy, but I have a feeling coaching's in your future as well with your kids. And I've had that opportunity. It's been really cool, and I've learned a lot about the game through coaching too, and certainly a lot about kids playing the game. And so Andy will be our guy in Rockford, and I just want to also take this opportunity to thank Mario for everything he did for us. A lot of what the Rink is today, Mario was a big part of it, and we wish him all the best. And at Bleacher Nation, we wish those guys the best with Mario. So, Andy, you got anything?
All good. Thanks. Really, really been fun to be a part of this group. And, the text chats are amazing. Over Twitter, they're just out. They make my day every day.
Yeah,
and, but yeah, just like everyone's saying, really excited to watch hockey again. And hope the AHL starts at some point. We'll see. There's no real plan. Someone's talking about it somewhere, but it'll be in my Google search every morning. We'll see.
Awesome. Sean, you got anything, buddy?
Tom Auburn, I think is what his name, got his first ECHL win tonight, so his first pro win. He was signed with Rockford on an AHL contract and was sent down to Indy last week, I believe, and he got the win today, so
awesome.
That's a big thing.
Nice.
So hopefully
Cool.
I know the plan maybe is Cal Morris and my guy Matt Tompkins in Rockford. The Hall of Famer Lankinen is with the Blackhawks. Just that, and just excited for hockey to be back and getting in with the ECHL, and excited to look for prospects like with Andy's stuff and Ray's stuff and stuff like that. So just excited.
Well, awesome. Thank you, Sean. And thank you guys for joining us tonight. And thank you, everybody who's tuned in, or if you're catching this recorded on some of the other platforms. We're on iTunes, and I believe this will be on our Facebook page for some time. It's always a pleasure to do this with these guys and with other members of our team. Thank you for stopping by. One last plug for our founding sponsor, puckhockey.com, puckhcky.com. Go check them out. Use our discount code, the Rink, THERINK, get 10% off. Buy some of that Rink gear. It looks good on you. I guarantee it. And so until next time, we will see you on the